Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to the brand new episode of the 𝗘𝗁𝘁𝗶𝗄 podcast series. In this podcast episode, I'm super thrilled and honored to welcome one of the most eminent and prominent leaders of the architecture space, Mr. Eric Jager, who happens to be the enterprise architect for the company Visio and also dons multiple roles in the other side, like say the webinar presenter for the company Association of the Enterprise Architects, and also has a lot of lecturing stints at the Eindhoven University of Technology, and along with that, he's even an author. And we're going to talk about those books as we just go in the conversation. So, Eric, it gives me an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this podcast session of mine. So, Eric, how are you doing, and how are things in Almere, Netherlands at the moment?
Yeah, well, thank you, Akhil, for the invitation. I'm good. It's a little bit rainy at the moment on my end, but other than that, I'm very happy with how things are progressing with everything I do surrounding enterprise architecture. On the one hand, for the organization that I work for, and on the other hand, and you mentioned that already in your introduction regarding the books that I've published. So a lot of wonderful things happening around that. So in one word, I'm good.
Fantastic, fantastic, Eric. This gives me that, the confidence that, today's conversation is just going to be rocking, and we have a lot of things to, talk about here. And I'm just looking forward to, get a lot of insights from you, and probably, which becomes really inspirational for me, down the line as I progress into the, career ladder of mine. So.
Yes, excellent. Well, let's dive into this.
100%. Eric, so Eric, like now beginning with, so Eric, let's talk about the timeline of your journey in the architecture space.
Yes, well, what can I say? I think it was about 2 decades ago that I think I found myself working in the architecture space without really realizing it. Because pursuing this career in enterprise architecture wasn't really a conscious or well-considered choice. It was not something that I thought about when I was younger, that I wanted to be this enterprise architect. So it kind of like was this natural process that unfolded. Because due to my original background in IT, I became interested in how things connected on a larger scale. And I think eventually I found myself dealing with issues at the architectural level. So over the following years, I became interested in other areas as well, such as the business operations and strategy, which I find endlessly interesting. So eventually, looking back, I realized that I was actually working in enterprise architecture. Now, having worked for various organizations over the years, I've seen up close how enterprise architecture is applied in practice. And it is this gap between theory on the one hand and practice on the other that actually quickly became apparent. So I began investigating the reason behind this discrepancy, and I concluded that many organizations lacked, and sadly some of them still lack, a clear understanding of how to begin working with architecture. Now, most organizations then try to apply the theory described in architecture frameworks such as the TOGAF Standard comprehensively and on large a scale as possible. And I think that is where most organizations also go wrong.
Yep.
Now, seeing this as the main reason that architecture initiatives fail, I wrote this book presenting an approach in which organizations can use to start working with architecture. And the book then helps organizations focus on building this solid foundation first. So drawing from my years of, let's say, practical experience, I created the Enterprise Architecture Implementation Wheel, which is a method for implementing enterprise architecture that can be used by starting architects, but also experienced ones.
Fantastic, Eric. Now, Eric, when you started getting into the field of enterprise architecture, did you have that feeling, wow, I'm going into something interesting, the route that I'm trying, or did you feel like I'm just going with the flow? Like, what was your call when you opted for this path?
Yeah, like I said, I got interested in all the different parts that are happening in an organization, and especially in how they all connect to each other. So it's the coherence between everything that's happening in an organization, what an organization does, what it uses, how it uses the things that it contains. And I think that getting an organization to, or helping an organization to see how all the things that they're doing connect by visualizing all those things, I think that's really something that could help an organization feel more in control of the things that they're doing. And in the end, it also helps them to realize their strategic course that they set out. So yeah, I find the coherence between things and the impact it has on the organization endlessly interesting.
That's superb, Eric. Now, Eric, I am, very keen to understand this. Like, is there any backstory, that is related to, your two books which you have authored? One happens to be, getting started with enterprise architecture, and the other is, the mastering the TOGAF standard. So, are there any backstory, that you would like to, share with me and our listeners in this session?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm quite active, right, within the architecture community, or at least I try to be as active as possible as my time or my schedule permits. So I regularly post on social platforms such as LinkedIn, because I strongly believe that it is very important to share information and ideas with like-minded individuals. And I'm also convinced that we never actually stop learning, nor do we have this monopoly on wisdom. So sharing ideas and perspectives is an excellent or even great way to continue this learning process.
Exactly.
And that is actually one of the reasons why I write blogs about the profession, about things that interest me or things that I've experienced. So for the last few years, I've published this blog every month on a topic related to the profession, related to enterprise architecture or even architecture in general. And that's a funny thing, a few years ago, I had this idea for yet another blog, and it concerned this gap that I saw between theory and practice within organizations. So I started describing this in a blog, but soon noticed that it kept on growing in length. And ultimately, it was my wife who jokingly said that it looked like that I was writing a book instead of a blog.
Oh.
And that's where I thought, well, that might not be such a bad idea. So several months later, I finished the manuscript for my first book, and I found a publisher who was interested in publishing it. So I explicitly chose not to publish the book myself, because I think anyone can do that, and it would give me much more satisfaction to find this publisher who is interested in the work other than me. So when this publisher expresses interest, it's a sign that others see value in the story as well. So then the first book, Getting Started with Enterprise Architecture, was published at the end of 2023, and it's been actually more successful than I initially anticipated. And it was that success that motivated to pick up the proverbial pen again and write the second book. Now this time, the second book is about the TOGAF Standard. And I decided to write about it because, based on my years of experience in the field, I saw that organizations and their architects were still, let's say, misusing the framework or not quite understanding the framework. So with this second book, I hope to address these common misconceptions about the TOGAF standard, and I want to demonstrate how the framework is actually intended to be used. And so Mastering the TOGAF Standard, as it's called, is coming out later this year.
Okay. That's amazing, Eric. Now, Eric, so I mean, as well as I am aware of the fact that, you have written the books, or you have written your books in English. Do you have plans of, again, translating that in your home language, or let's say in your, in your mother tongue, in Dutch? Like, did that thought, come across your mind?
Well, before I started writing the first book, I did think about the language that I wanted to use. So I thought maybe I should write it in Dutch, as you suggested. But then, if you look at the architecture community in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is a very small country compared to other countries in Europe, that would also mean that the audience that I would reach with the book would be limited. So I thought that using the English language would be better to reach a larger audience. And given that most of the other literature that's been written about enterprise architecture over the past few years has also been written in English, that seemed like a better fit. With regard to the translation you mentioned, I'm very honored to say that the first book has also been or is being translated into Chinese as we speak.
Oh wow, that's nice.
Yeah, and it's coming out hopefully in December this year. So that would mean that I could get the story that I'm telling to a whole new and very large new market, which is, I think it's fantastic to get that side of the globe also interested and on their way with practicing enterprise architecture.
That's nice, Eric. So, Eric, is there any plans? Like, I understand now, you have that, your book is getting translated into Chinese. Is there any chance that, your book will be translated into, those fellow European countries, like, let's say, French, Italian, German? Is there, any plans lined up for that in the near future?
There is some talk, well, and not directly with countries in Europe, but in the Arabic countries.
Okay.
So I am currently having some preliminary or exploratory conversations with people in the Arabic countries about getting the book translated into that language as well. And I'm not really sure if there is an opportunity to translate it into French or Spain or whatever, because those European countries, they almost all have the ability to speak and read English. So
Yeah.
the need or the desire or the wish to translate it into country-specific languages is not that much present.
I totally, agree with that point, Eric. Now, Eric, in the starting, I just addressed that, you work for a company called Visio. So in Visio, like, I mean, what is that, what are your roles and responsibilities being the enterprise architect there?
Well, for those who are not familiar with Visio, and I assume that a lot of listeners are not, Visio is an organization that helps their clients, and their clients are the visually impaired. So Visio is a reference to visual, being able to see. So we have clients who see a little less than you and I, and we have clients who are blind from birth. And we try to help those clients by providing the best care or healthcare for their particular situation. So that means that we are delivering all kinds of services to the clients to help them get along in their life without being dependable on other people, to actually make them self-reliant. And so we deliver a lot of services to those clients, and integrating all the information that goes around while delivering these services requires architecture or enterprise architecture, a global overview to make sure that the information is coherent between all those or over all those layers or domains that the organization entails. So that is one of my main tasks, to make sure that this strategy that the organization has in getting the best care delivered to our clients actually gets translated to what we do as an organization, and how this information that we need at our fingertips to aid those clients is actually available at the time we need it and in the form that we need it.
Fantastic, Eric. Now, Eric, can you give an overview of, your creation, the enterprise architecture implementation wheel, to me and our listeners, across the world? Like, I mean, I really found that particular term very interesting. So I would like to, know more about it from your end.
Yeah, absolutely. My absolute pleasure. So the EA wheel, the short version of the enterprise architecture implementation wheel, it's actually a method or an approach, a practical and pragmatic approach to developing this fundamental enterprise architecture. And like I mentioned earlier, it is based on the TOGAF standard, because I'm a great advocate of the TOGAF standard.
Okay.
So the method then differs from TOGAF in that it adapts its structure and its flow, but it reorganizes the content of the TOGAF standard into 4 main stages. So there's document, define, execute, and control. And
Okay.
each of these main stages is then broken down into what I like to call key focus areas, which lead to actionable artifacts, offering this streamlined entry point, if you will, for organizations that are new to practicing enterprise architecture. And it is the straightforward description of the steps within this approach that ensures that it's an accessible approach. So the simplicity with which actions and outcomes are described and explained makes this method really applicable to almost any situation or scenario. Now, rather than aiming for exhaustive coverage, the EA wheel method provides this scalable foundation that organizations can build upon as they mature. So it establishes a solid basis for effectively adopting and applying the core principles of the TOGAF standard. Now, it's designed primarily for early career architects or organizations that are new to working with architecture, but the method emphasizes clarity and usability, and it includes this selection of tailored catalogs, diagrams, maps, even matrices, all essential deliverables that make fundamental enterprise architecture easier to understand and to implement. So the EA wheel can be thought of as this simplified and tailored version of the TOGAF standard, providing
Okay.
an approach that is, again, easy to understand and to apply to creating this fundamental enterprise architecture.
That's amazing, Eric. Now, Eric, what was that moment like, when you got this particular idea that, the EA wheel, like, was there any interesting anecdote that was, linked to that?
It's actually something that grew on me while I was writing the book. So for the first book, I wanted to really focus on the basics of the profession of enterprise architecture. So I wanted to touch on all the aspects that were related to the profession. And one thing that I also wanted to put in the book and really underline or underscore in the book is a method on how to actually practice enterprise architecture. So at first I was thinking about maybe I should refer to the frameworks that are already out there. But then again, I saw this huge mountain people thought they needed to climb in order to start working with architecture. So it was kind of holding them back to start practicing architecture based on the frameworks that are available. So I thought maybe if I could create something that would be a little bit easier to understand, it would invite people or interest people to actually start using it and then mature from there. So I thought, what would help people to understand how architecture could be implemented? And one of the first things that I noticed when you look at various conversations happening on LinkedIn, for example, is how there is always this discussion about the process or the development of architecture being or not being this step-by-step approach, but more like a continuous development. So
Yeah.
I thought, what shape could resemble this continuous process? And then I came to this circle, which eventually led to the development of the wheel. Because a circle has no beginning and has no end, right? So that is a perfect match to use in the context of enterprise architecture. So that's basically what led me to the idea of using a wheel. And then it was just filling in the blanks, creating these actionable artifacts, using not all the things there are to enterprise architecture, but making a selection of things. And that eventually led to the content of the implementation wheel.
That's a fantastic, let's say a fantastic approach, or let's say a fantastic anecdote, which you've, just narrated to me. Now, Eric, I totally understand, your book, let's say, your book, the let's say the Getting Started with the EA, or, the enterprise architecture has been well received by the practitioners. So I'm pretty curious to understand this, like, what has contributed to its popularity in the first place?
If you ask me as the author, and of course I'm biased, But in my opinion, I think the book owes its success to three key factors. So I think first there is the way that it is written. It uses this really narrative style. So unlike other books that describe the theory from a more architectural framework perspective, this book reads like a story rather than a reference work. And it also avoids this static, if you will, writing style. Now, the chapters are also manageable in size, with the exception of chapter 8, which explains the entire theory behind the approach. And because of the smaller size of the chapters, this contributes to a rather pleasant reading experience.
Okay.
Now, second, I think that the language is also accessible. So difficult words and excessive jargon are deliberately avoided. And also terms and definitions are explained in very recognizable language. Now, enterprise architecture in itself is a field which has many definitions, so it's important to use them carefully. But they can also be explained in a more accessible way, and that's what I've done in the book. And I think third, a third factor contributing to the book's popularity is that it's the described method is easy to apply in any organization. So the enterprise architecture implementation wheel is limited to the basics of enterprise architecture. It does not have an excessive number of stages, steps, and key focus areas. And this keeps it clear and very straightforward. So the components of the implementation wheel are recognizable to everyone, and they leave little room for interpretation. And organizations and architects who are just starting to work with architecture can begin right away using the method. So overall, I think the book provides this practical and pragmatic approach to enterprise architecture, and I think that also appeals to practitioners.
Fantastic. That's a beautiful approach, Eric. Now, Eric, I myself, I've just gone through your LinkedIn posts, and I always see there's someone or the other, writing good things about your book and, and giving good review. So, Eric, from your point of view, I just want to understand, like, how is your feeling like when when you see all those, those cheering views, or let's say the cheering reviews from people, who have a good, word of mouth towards your creation?
Yeah, each and every review is fantastic to receive and to read. And like I mentioned in the beginning, I never set out with a formalized plan to writing a book. It just kind of like took shape while I was writing this blog.
Okay.
So it wasn't actually on my bucket list to write this book. And even after I did, I had absolutely no expectations whatsoever about the book. So I'm very pleased and very happy and very honored with each and every review that people take the time to writing a review. And luckily for me, a lot of them, almost all of them have been very positive. And each time that a review appears online, I'm really thrilled to read it. So it's an absolute pleasure time and again.
Fantastic, Eric. So, Eric, has there been any instance where where you have got a review, let's say, from the likes of India or let's say Australia, like from these two regions, did you, get any review kind of a thing?
Yeah, there have been reviews from actually both Australia and India, a bit more from India than from Australia. And also, I think if you look at India, for example, I think that the people in India or that part of the world can actually benefit from not only my book, but books on enterprise architecture in general. And I'm really hoping that the way the content in my book is described can actually help people in India to start practicing enterprise architecture if they're not doing it already, or at least, or when they are, to have them take another look at the way they practice architecture and maybe think that doing it the easy way will actually help them create this solid foundation that they can build upon from there.
Fantastic. And from Australia, I mean, what was the review like?
Well, that was also, luckily for me, also a very positive review. I've been in contact with this person who wrote the review, and we chatted about the profession in general, and that is what actually got him interested in the book. So at that time, it's been a while back, I sent him the digital version of my book, because it was kind of hard to actually get his hands on the printed version. And he read it, and he provided his feedback on the book, and also this positive review, which is available on Amazon. Yeah, so I think it's yet another good review.
Amazing. So I just want to know, like, let's say, we were talking about your book and, we were talking about everything, with respect to the reviews that you have got. Now, Eric, what is your take on the strategical aspects of the enterprise architecture space?
This is an excellent question, and I think this will take me a little while to give you this complete picture of my thoughts. So I think if you look at throughout the years, enterprise architecture has evolved from this primarily IT-focused discipline to a strategic and business-centric practice. So it plays a critical role in helping organizations to optimize their operations, align their IT investments with their business goals, and navigate the complexities of this modern digital age, if you will. Now, if we go back some 30, 40 years to the 1980s, then the term enterprise architecture began to gain traction, right? So it was primarily focused on defining and documenting the structure and components of an organization's information system. That's how it's started. And that decade then saw the rise of methodologies such as John Zechman's framework for enterprise architecture. But more frameworks emerged in response to this growing complexity of IT environments and business processes. Now, if we skip forward another 20 years to the early 2000s, I think that's where we saw a greater focus on integrating IT and business strategies, which then led to the adoption of enterprise architecture as this strategic management discipline. So architecture frameworks such as the Zechman framework, but also the TOGAF Standard, gained wider acceptance. And it was in the mid to late 2000s that EA actually evolved to address the complexities of globalized and networked enterprises. So steadily, enterprise architecture became this essential tool for guiding digital transformation initiatives, for cloud adoption, agile development practices, and whatnot. And in recent years, I think EA has continued to evolve in response to the growing importance of digitization, of data-driven decision-making, and also emerging technologies such as AI. So EA is becoming more adaptive and agile to address these dynamic and rapidly changing business landscape.
That's amazing, Eric. Now, Eric, can you just give me a walkthrough about your lecturing stint at, the Eindhoven University of Technology, and also, can you give me an insight into, your public speaking at different conferences and, seminars? When I talk about Eindhoven, Eric, the thing that I just remember is the football team PSV Eindhoven. So that's how I'm a little bit familiar with that.
Yeah. For me, Eindhoven is I'm not really familiar with the city. I think it's a great city, but I haven't actually been to the city itself, because when I am in Eindhoven, I'm at the university, and after my classes, I just leave home or leave for home, because for me, where I live, it's a 2-hour drive. So that takes away my chance of actually exploring Eindhoven. But yeah, again, like I mentioned before, I think sharing information about our profession is of the utmost importance. And again, no one knows everything, and everyone can gain new insights by hearing other people's ideas on anything, especially this profession. And that's why I teach at this university. So I teach this class there about applying enterprise architecture to the healthcare industry.
Okay.
And now healthcare is a special industry, right? Because its primary focus is not inherently strategic. So a long-term view of several years is often lacking. And this is dictated, I think, by the primary processes of the industry, which is, of course, providing healthcare to the patients. Nevertheless, I think the sector would actually benefit from having this long-term vision and to look to the future. And architecture can provide fantastic support in this regard. And that is why I enjoy teaching students on how to use enterprise architecture to help hospitals and other healthcare institutions to develop and implement strategies and visualize the impact of their strategies.
Okay.
Now, you also asked me about these conferences and seminars. So in addition to teaching at the university, I also speak at these conferences. So last year, for example, I was invited to go to the Republic of China to present the implementation wheel at this major event, which was organized by the Open Group. And I will soon be speaking in Amsterdam. Somewhere mid-November, I will virtually address a group of interested parties in Iran. And perhaps next year, I will even travel to the Dominican Republic to talk about my implementation wheel. So yeah, I'm going global.
Fantastic. I think, next time, Eric, you should even travel to the likes of India and Australia. And, in India also, there are a lot of people, since India is, with respect to technology, it's a growing market. But I feel, from the strategic point of view of the architecture, also people will definitely connect to. So I think, Eric, you should, keep your options, connected with India as well, probably if you given a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. If an opportunity presents itself, then I'm sure I will.
That's perfect. Eric, now going back to that to the question which I just asked you about about your stint at the Eindhoven University of Technology. So when you're giving the lecture there, so I mean, when did you actually get the opportunity to go and venture into that? Like, how were you approached, like into the lecturing side?
Yeah, it was already quite some years ago, perhaps even almost a decade ago, that I was working for this hospital as an enterprise architect. And in doing so, I joined a lot of architecture working groups, and I presented a lot of my materials to boards of various hospitals. And it was in one of those sessions that there was also someone present who was teaching at the university in Eindhoven, and he heard what I had to say and thought, well, maybe that would be interesting enough to get that message to a larger audience of students. So we could actually start teaching about the profession at the very start of people's careers, instead of having to educate them later on when they already started working for an organization. So I thought that was a really good idea to actually deliver the thought and ideas of enterprise architecture at the source, and then be able to build on from that. So that's when I joined the University of Technology in Eindhoven with this course on enterprise architecture, specifically within the healthcare industry. And I've been doing it ever since, and I love it. Educating people, sharing my ideas about the profession, helping them better understand the coherence between everything that is EA related. Yeah, I think leaving that kind of a mark, leaving people or having people leave the room interested in how they can apply it in their daily practice. Yeah, that's a really satisfactory feeling.
Fantastic, Eric. Now, Eric, when you're teaching, to all the students in the university, like how has been the response from the students? Like, do people, enjoy, getting taking the lessons from your end, or do you have that fan following among your students that you're their favorite lecturer? Did you get that kind of compliments from their end?
Yeah, well, actually, the compliments do come at the end, but this is enterprise architecture, right, that we're talking about. So
yeah.
It is a tough subject tough message to get across. So there is a lot of theory that surrounds the profession. And if you're not that familiar or not directly involved in working with enterprise architecture, it kind of tends to sound a bit theoretical. So I really try to use examples that they can relate to based on their working environment. If you look at the total running time of the class that I teach, I think that the first third is getting some of the theory across, and I think that's what most people find the most boring of the entire class. Yeah, let's be honest, because that's too far from their daily practice. But then in the second third of my class, I get them to use the theory in practical situations that they come across. And that's when you see the proverbial light bulb flash on. And that's when they actually get this idea of, oh, so that's what is meant by all this theory, and that is how I can apply it. So they actually see enterprise architecture being brought to their own doorstep and how they can use it. And then in the last part, we do this case based on a fictitious hospital, and you actually see people wanting to join this conversation and sharing their own experience based on the previous parts of the class. So eventually, they're all, or almost everyone, is enthusiastic, but it starts off with a little reluctance.
Yeah,
each year it's the same thing.
But the way you're handling and the way you're giving them the confidence, Eric, that is really remarkable. And I feel that every university should have a lecturer like you, really.
Yeah, but I can be at one place only at one time. So.
But whatever it is, I mean, and given the time and everything, but still you're instilling the confidence in your students. Really, I would say, had I been in their place, I would also have enjoyed your classes, and surely, on their behalf, I would just love to say that whatever you're doing amazing.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right. When you talk about the practical examples, right, Eric, can you just name one practical example that you would like to share in this session?
Yeah, one example that I often use is trying to get people to see how their activities relate to the strategy of the hospital, right? So if a hospital wants to expand their activities on a certain area, or even if they want to provide even better hygiene within the environment, it all boils down to using specific processes, automating certain capabilities, using the right applications or functionality of applications, and not doing things twice or even multiple times than twice. And I try to get them to draw this visualization of a process that they're all familiar with.
Okay.
For example, patient identification. And the funny thing is that when I put them in groups, and each group starts describing or visualizing their own process, and then at the end we compare all these various visualizations that they made, and they start to see a certain overlap in the things that they're doing. And there are some differences, and those differences are then being talked about. But by doing this kind of exercise, making it really practical and pragmatic, you'll actually teach them to look at processes in a structured way, and also allowing them to start asking questions of why are we doing the things in the way that we're doing it, and
right.
Can't we smooth out certain things, and we see in this process that we're doing, we're creating certain bits of information multiple times. Why are we doing that? Because we already have the information available at this point in the process. Why don't we reuse it when we get further in the process? So the value that I'm providing to these students is to make them see things on their own instead of having me tell them how they should look at it. They're actually seeing it on their own, and they're starting to ask the right questions based on their own thoughts. And I think that's the most valuable thing for students to take away.
That's a beautiful example and a good practical case, Eric. Now, Eric, I want to understand this. Like, would you like to talk about the people, or let's say about the mentors, or let's say the colleagues who have had a huge impact during your architecture journey?
I think in our field, I believe it's very important to regard each other as peers. So in short, I don't think that I can name this list of mentors who have helped me develop. I think I've done a lot of it myself by listening really close to what others had to say, and the way they shared their ideas with me. And then I try to share my ideas with them. And that's kind of how we both grew in what we were doing. Now, of course, there have been moments where I've created or received support from various people, and the support often involved helping me actually take the initiatives that I was developing even a step further. So, for instance, there is this I cannot name the organization, but it's a major organization that has recently expressed an interest in my implementation wheel. Okay. We are currently engaged in exploratory discussions about how and in what form the implementation wheel could contribute to further developing this architecture framework that they manage. And by working together on the further development of these materials, I think, and getting in contact with other views on the same topic, I think that is what makes us all grow. But it's to name mentors, that will be a little difficult for me. Or people comment on the book that I wrote, or the presentation that I gave, or the speech that I've given somewhere. And I think if you look at all these various things together, I take certain things with me, and I'll try to do better next time. Okay. So yeah, in essence, everyone that I engage with can also be seen as some kind of mentor, if you will. Yeah.
Fantastic. Eric knows so now, Eric, before we actually, conclude our podcast session, let's take a lighter route in the form of a rapid fire round. So all this while I was, bombarding you with the questions about architecture journey, about, enterprise architecture, about your books, about the creation, the EA wheel, and, about a lot of things, about a lot of insights which you have provided. Now we'll take a lighter route where we'll just talk about your likes and interests in the form of a rapid fire round. Now, I mean, I just got about your likes and interests, but now I'll talk about your likes and interests, in the form of rapid fire questions. I'll, ask you a few rapid fire questions, and, you could just, give me your view on it. All right. So since Eric, you're based in the Netherlands, I am pretty keen to understand, what is your favorite football team?
That's actually a really good question. If you look at the way football teams are organized in the Netherlands, we have our capital is Amsterdam. And there is this other major city, which is Rotterdam. And depending on where you live in the Netherlands, you're either for the football, you support the football club from Amsterdam, or you support the one from Rotterdam. Yeah. So it's given that I live closer to Amsterdam, logically I would support the football club from Amsterdam, which is called Ajax. But then again, this football club isn't doing really well in all the leagues that they're currently in. So yeah. I'm not really sure if I should voice my support for that particular football club right now. But that's the way that it's arranged in my country.
Okay. So yeah, that gives me a complete idea. So now, Eric, I was talking about your Dutch origin and about your favorite football club. Since I come from the Indian origin, I am pretty keen to ask you this, Eric, what is your favorite Indian food that you always like to try?
Oh my, that's actually a very difficult question, because I'm not really sure if I can name a particular Indian dish. Perhaps if we could flip the roles and you could mention 2 or 3 typical Indian dishes, then I could say which I prefer most.
100%. So there is something called butter naan, which is like, Indian bread, North Indian bread. Butter
I
naan,
I
roti.
don't recognize the name.
Do you recognize the name roti?
Yeah, that I do. Yeah,
The roti and then butter chicken.
yeah. Also, yeah. Well, I'm kind of a meat guy, meat loving guy. So I would go for the latter that you mentioned.
The butter chicken, right? Yeah, I mean that's a very famous dish, amongst everyone in the world, and everyone whoever tries the Indian food, they love trying that. And yeah,
So I think that should there be a time when I be invited to speak in India, I'm sure to check out the local delicacies there.
you should, Eric, because there is a plethora of dishes that you'll have. Every region as you go, go from different
Yeah,
state to state, the food keeps on changing, and you'll be surprised and amazed by the diversity that you'll see there.
yeah. Well, then I'm hoping to be able to do so in the future. It will be great, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Eric, I mean, we have just talked about, you have written a lot of books. Now, since you are an author, like, what is your favorite book that you like to read? What's your favorite genre? Is it fiction? Is it autobiographies? Which one do you like the most?
I think it's yeah. I think I'd say fiction. And there is this. I'm not really sure. I haven't been following the author for decades, but there was this time when I was in college that I read books about yeah, what was it about? The legal issues, legal
Mhm.
matters. So this author was probably had a background in legal matters, and there was this one book that was called, I think it was called The Chamber. I think it was
Okay.
by John Grisham. Yeah, it
Hmm.
was John Grisham, and that really captured me because of the way the story unfolded, the way the story was told. And the chamber refers to the gas chamber, or
Mhm.
the chamber that where someone gets executed after having committed a serious crime. That particular chamber.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, but it was written from both perspectives of the person representing, from a legal perspective, the client who was sentenced to die, and there
Mhm.
was this other perspective from the person who was actually getting the sentence. And by merging those two, you really got a complete picture of the situation that was unfolding. And I thought that was really well done. So that's something that stuck with me.
All right. Awesome, Eric. Now, Eric, what is your favorite holiday destination that you would like to always travel to?
Oh, that's easy. That's Greece.
Greece. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and my family, we love the history, the culture, the temperature, the food, the people, everything about Greece. And we actually have these plans to, so when we don't have to work anymore in let's say 20 years, when we retire, we hope to emigrate to Greece and to settle down in that country. So that's our, let's say, dream for the future.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's an absolutely um, fantastic country, and we hope to end up on Corfu.
That's interesting, Eric. I have not been to Greece, but I would love to visit Greece. And hearing from you, I'll definitely, take my stride there someday. Yeah, for sure. What was the last song that you have heard?
The last song that I've heard, well, actually, that was it's a band from I think the late 80s, early 90s. It was Guns N' Roses.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
my son is currently trying to figure out what his favorite music style is. He's 17, so he's trying out everything that possibly is.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's recently played this song Guns N' Roses and Sweet Child of Mine, I think it's
Yeah, yeah,
called.
yeah. That's a very famous
So that
one.
was the last thing that I heard yesterday evening. And that reminded me of the time that I went to high school, because that was the time that Guns N' Roses was really up and coming.
Yes.
So it kind of took me back, by hearing the song, it kind of took me back to my own um, time at high school. And it was, yeah, it was funny remembering those things.
Complete nostalgia all the way then.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic. So the final question to you, Eric, what is your favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie of all time? Well, I'm a big fan of other writers who are able to create this living and breathing world without it being real. So it's a fantasy, if you will. So Tolkien is one of my all-time favorite writers, the author of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I think that the most recent versions of those movies are excellent, and I really try to make the time during the end of the year holidays, during Christmas, to actually watch them time and again. So I've seen them like 100 times. But I think The Lord of the Rings is an excellent story, and also a very, very good movie, or 3 movies in one, if you will.
Yes.
So that would be my all-time favorite.
Fantastic, Eric. So, Eric, once again, thank you so much for, taking time from your busy schedule and, being part of my podcast initiative. Your support and, your participation in this initiative of mine really, gives me that huge confidence and boost. I just had a lovely time conversing with you, through this journey where you talked about the architecture space, where you talked about your books, where you talked about your creation. Everything was so insightful, and I just loved conversing about it, again and again. So thank you so much again, Eric.
Yes, well, thank you for the invitation. I also enjoyed it. I hope my answers to your question provide some insight into how I think, how I act, and why I do the things that I do, and what I find interesting. And I hope that the audience will be pleasantly surprised by this.
100%. I mean, our audience will definitely be immersed into the conversations that we had, and they'll completely get triggered by all the insights shared by you, for sure. And so, Eric, on this note, or let's say on this note, listeners, we would be concluding our podcast session. So this is your host Akhil Navluri signing off. We will be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Take care. Goodbye. Stay tuned, and au revoir. Thank you.